Come back, madam.
Please be seated.
Okay, come back, madam. And you can bring the jury.
Yes, sir. All jurors present, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Please. Afternoon, Doctor.
Hi.
One of the first things you taught me in this case was the definition of a back. You recall that discussion?
Yes, I do.
So would it be fair to say that how medically you define the back may be different than how people communicate to define the back?
It is possible, yes.
The back medically is from the armpit straight down. Is that correct?
There is an imaginary line that goes down the side of the body at the middle of the armpit, and anything behind that line is considered the back.
So the area between the shoulders is that's not the definition of back medically. It's a more expansive area. Is that correct?
The back actually wraps around a little bit on the sides of the body.
And so when we talk about the injuries to the gentleman in this case, in layman's terms, they're actually to the side, beyond the midline. Is it midline or?
Yes, beyond the lateral midline, but they are to the back.
And in picture, I think it's 153. Stacy's at the 153. That's correct. case 171, please? Doctor, I think 171 is on the screen now.
Yes.
That's a picture that you took, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And it's a picture of the gentleman's back?
It is a picture of his back.
And on his back, we see the piece of the taser that's in the gentleman's back, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And it's very difficult to see, if you can see it, any of the wounds in his back other than the one on his right shoulder. Is that correct?
The other two are on the margin of the skin. You can see them at the edge, but in this, the body is tilted slightly away from the camera.
Okay. And that's the photograph that you took?
Yes, it is.
Of the gentleman's back?
Yes, it is.
He seems quite muscular in that photograph. Is that correct? You find that he's muscular?
Every person's definition of muscular is different.
As would be any person's definition of back. Now, regardless of the definition, you had called him obese earlier,
Yes.
which we're all rather sensitive to the definition of obese, correct?
I am using the medical definition of obese.
So the medical definition does not take into account the difference in weight between fat and muscle.
That's correct.
And muscle weighs more than fat. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And so whatever a person's height is, just to say he's obese, which to a layman may mean fat, to a medical doctor of your caliber and the business you're in, it's purely a weight relationship to height.
That is correct.
And it doesn't take into account the muscle structure of the person in terms of the weight.
That is correct.
In terms of all that definition of obese, medically, it can be fat or it can be muscle, or it can be bones, it can be hair on the head, it can be whatever that total weight is. Is that correct?
The calculation is a little bit complex, but it takes into account the person's height and the weight mostly, and it's converted to body surface area.
When the gentleman came to the morgue, his hands were wrapped in brown paper bags. Is that correct?
Yes.
And if you would, explain to the jury if that's a normal process.
Yes, it is. The hands are bagged at the scene in order to preserve evidence, and that way any DNA evidence that may be present on the hands, or in some cases gunshot residue, that would also be preserved by the paper bags.
And the DNA evidence that would be preserved on the hands is for what purpose, if you know?
In order to identify if there is the DNA of another individual, for example, under the fingernails.
Or on the hands?
Or on the hands.
Or on the back of the hands?
That is correct.
Or on the wrists?
Yes.
That's why bags are placed over the hands to preserve evidence. Correct?
Correct.
Now, when you were present at the autopsy, when you performed the autopsy on April 5th, were there representatives from law enforcement present?
Yes.
Do you recall who they were?
Agent Don Claycomb and Agent Angela Peterson.
Were there any representatives of Mr. Slager present?
I'm sorry?
Were there any representatives of Mr. Slager present?
No.
Who took the bags off the hands of the gentleman?
I took the bags off one hand, and it is possible that the coroner took the bag off the other hand, at least temporarily.
And were those bags preserved?
Yes, they were.
And where did they go after you took them off and the coroner took them off?
They were transferred to Agent Claycomb.
And Agent Claycomb is with the State Law Enforcement Division?
Yes.
Now, do you know whether those bags were placed on the gentleman's hands at the scene of the incident?
I believe they were. I am not sure.
That would be the normal.
That would be the normal procedure.
Now, did you take exemplars from the gentleman to compare DNA with, should DNA of the gentleman be found at another location?
Did I take a DNA standard
Yes.
from the gentleman, meaning Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Yes, I did.
And tell the jury, if you would, what type of exemplar that was.
We take blood as a DNA sample.
And that blood was then transferred to SLED?
Yes, it was.
And the purpose of that is to do DNA comparisons, is that correct?
That is correct.
Other blood is taken from other areas to do a toxicology.
That is
examination
correct.
of what's in the blood at the time.
Yes.
Now, did you take hair samples?
Yes, I did.
And what would be the purpose of taking hair samples?
Again, the purpose that we take it for is also for DNA and also for hair comparison as trace evidence.
All right, so for DNA, we have blood and we have hair, so that one could use either the blood or the hair to do that comparison.
Usually the blood is the preferred sample.
Because with the hair, you have to actually get the root of the hair. Is that
Yes,
correct?
that's correct.
Was that done in this case?
Yes, it was.
And from the hair sample, can one do other testing?
Yes, there can be.
For instance, you sent the blood off to be examined for toxicology purposes. Could the hair be sent off as well for toxicology purposes?
In certain cases, yes, it can.
And that toxicology purposes would then give a history beyond what's present in the body at the moment of death of drug usage. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And you did that?
I-
You took the hair and provided it to SLED, is that correct?
We took hair samples for trace evidence comparison, and I handed it over to SLED, yes.
Now, I may be getting out of your area, and if I am, please tell me. In other words, out of your area of expertise. Do you know whether or not levels of toxicity, that is, levels of some chemical composition, the actions on the body, if you will, the mind and the body of a person, are different depending on their chronic use or acute use, chronic being long-term use, acute being of the moment of drugs?
In general medical terms, yes.
Now, Did you ever get a report back from the toxicology service for the peripheral blood?
Yes, I did.
Did you ever get a report back from toxicological services regarding hair analysis?
No, I did not.
So that this jury then would be deprived of knowledge about how potential chronic use of drugs would affect one's mind and body at the time of their death.
I'm not understanding the question.
It's my understanding that you have said that the medical literature says there is a difference of chemicals, how they act on the body, if they're taken on an occasion, one time, or whether they're chronically used over a long period of time. The effect of the chemicals would be different. Is that correct?
Again, I am not following the question.
I thought that you had indicated that chronic use of chemicals by a person can affect a person in one way that's different from an acute use or a singular use of chemicals.
It can, yes.
And then the next question was, did you have from the peripheral blood the chemical analysis of Mr. Scott at the time of his death?
Did I receive the peripheral blood results?
Yes.
Yes, I did.
And did you ever receive the results of the chronic use taken from the hair samples? Did you ever receive a report on that to include in your report?
That is not done by autopsy protocol.
Did you ever receive, the question is, did you ever receive a report back from toxicology evaluation of the hair samples?
No.
And the reason is because that isn't the norm. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And that is why you keep hair sample exemplars indefinitely, so that at some future time, if it becomes important, they can be examined. Is that correct?
We do not keep any evidence at MUSC.
Is evidence kept?
We only keep the biological samples for 1 year.
Were the hair samples kept?
I do not know. I signed them over to law enforcement.
And who in law enforcement would that have been?
Agent Don Claycomb of SLED.
So the hair exemplars that you took that could be used for evaluation of chemicals into that body and/or DNA was turned over to SLED.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Because it's not your protocol as the medical examiner to do that.
I'm a forensic pathologist, not a medical examiner. This is a coroner system.
Dr. Tormans, whatever your position is, a medical examiner, a forensic pathologist, were those exemplars turned over as part of what you do as a profession?
Yes, they were.
And the purpose for turning them over is to allow further testing. Is that correct?
Allow for further testing.
Yes.
Yes.
So if there's a question that arises, let's say anytime in the next 18 months, those are exemplars are preserved, or at least you turn them over to law enforcement for preservation in case further testing is warranted. Is that correct?
Again, can you repeat the question?
Do you know whether or not the hair samples were maintained?
I already said I do not know.
But you turned them over to SLED.
Yes, I did.
In your testimony earlier today, you indicated that there was no, did you call it stippling?
Stippling.
And stippling is what again?
when burning particles of gunpowder strike the skin and create little burned abrasions.
And would that be from a contact wound?
No, sir.
What was the contact wound you had discussed?
The contact wound would deposit soot on the body surface.
So a contact wound, if I would, I'm holding my right index finger against my left arm. A contact wound is just that, where the gun is up against the skin.
Up against the skin.
Usually found in gunshot suicide.
Yes, it can be found in gunshot suicides.
And then you testified there was some other markings where one could tell within 3 feet.
Within 3 feet or so, you get the stippling on the skin.
And if somebody's wearing clothing, would that interfere with the stippling on the skin?
Clothing could interfere with the stippling, yes.
And at the time that Mr. Scott's body arrived in your possession, he was clothed?
Yes, he was, although the shirts were cut.
And his hands were bagged?
Yes,
And the bags were removed?
at least one was.
And there was testing done of his hands in your presence?
No, not in my presence.
So if anyone did testing, it wasn't done during the autopsy?
It was not done during the autopsy, no.
Do you know if the testing of the hands was done by anybody when the body was still at the medical university?
I believe that the coroner opened the bag to do fingerprint identification
And what time was that?
prior to the autopsy.
What time was that?
I do not know.
The coroner entered the morgue and took the bags off the hands of Mr. Scott before you had an opportunity to examine them?
Yes.
And was evidence removed from his hands
Not that I am aware of.
because you weren't there?
I was not there.
But fingerprints were taken in the middle of the night of Mr. Scott, isn't that correct?
I do not know what time it is, at what time it was, but sometime prior to the autopsy.
In your report that you have before you, would it indicate that the body bag number had been changed out because somebody went into the morgue in the middle of the night and took the bags off the hands?
Yes.
Well, tell the jury about that part.
The body bag was transported to the Medical University of South Carolina and it was sealed with tag number 376. At our facility, the deputy coroner and a SLED agent opened the body bag sealed, confirmed the identification, and sealed the bag again, this time with tag 379. And then the body transport bag was received in our autopsy room, sealed with tag number 379.
So the body seal was not the same number that was placed on it at the incident site. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you have testified, although you weren't there, the purpose for that was to identify Mr. Scott
That's what I was told.
by fingerprints,
Yes.
even though everybody knew who it was. Correct?
I do not know if they know who he was.
The testing for trace evidence, if there was any, the testing for gunshot residue, if there was any, was done after you performed the autopsy. Is that correct?
I am not sure about that.
You don't know who did it, when they did it.
I do not.
Thank you.
Read that right.
No question.
I thank you.
Yeah.
Let me call your next witness. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll have you go to the jury room for a few minutes. Please not discuss the case. In recess for a few minutes.